Okay, so I come before you today to talk about the current stimulus and where we are. Just as an update, we still have not gotten the stimulus to be passed through Congress. Um, they did not come to a compromise. I mean, I think something that we were all, as a people, kind of on one accord is just to come to a compromise so that we can get to the next step, making sure that people are just taken care of over these next couple of months. So it would have been nice to see that the CARES Act, to show that you care, would have been extended, and you guys could have come to a compromise and pass the stimulus. So what I want to do today is do like a more interactive so that you can see for yourself. I believe something that we don't often see in our government is transparency and accountability. So I want to make sure that we are transparent as well as being able to be accountable for the things that we are allotting and saying as well. So this is the CARES Act. We've had this year, what has already passed is the CARES Act. CARES Act is what people have. The first stimulus check that you got was $1,200. That was from the CARES Act. The $600 from unemployment that you got was also from the CARES Act. That ended in July. So now that those who are unemployed have no more unemployment that has run out in July, well, then you leave about 50 million people without sufficient income or without an income. So we've had 50 million people to apply. Now, that doesn't say that there are not more people that are unemployed. It just says that those are the people that are in dire need for funding now. So you're talking about 50 million, and there may be more that may have just not applied or something to that effect. So we really don't know. But because we don't know the specific needs of every individual, the best thing to do is to cover us with an act. So we start off with the first act. The first act was the CARES Act. The CARES Act was $2.2 trillion. That was the CARES Act. And you can't see it here, but that says 2.2 trillion. We've got that 600 for unemployment. That came up to $268 billion that was allotted for the CARES Act. The rebate came up to $1,200. That was $293 billion, and then so on. You've got the SBA loan that we did, the PPP loan, the large for large businesses as well, for state and local government. We covered all that under that act. So if you watched my last video, what I said is we already had a bill that covered everything. And so this is the bill that covered everything. That was our round one stimulus. And so now we're coming up to the next phase, and we're coming together, but yet we're still debating. And this is debate. As I was saying, we have the GOP, the great old party, or the Republicans is who we reference to when we see the GOP. They've set a $1.1 trillion bill. And that's because a majority of that was what is left over from what is allotted for the CARES Act. So we have funding that's been allotted already, that's been saying, yes, we're approving this amount that we can use. Well, we've had about $1 trillion left over, because what people don't know is in the CARES Act, there's still about $1 trillion that we haven't spent out of the funds. So we've spent some of it, but we've got about $1 trillion that have yet to be spent, because the CARES Act it's also meant to cover a long period of time. So majority of the money, yes, is used now, but there's a small portion of the money that's used over the next decade. The same way with the HEALS Act that the GOP is presenting of 1.1 trillion. So 1.1 trillion takes us up to about the limit of our budget of what's allotted for the time of this pandemic for COVID-19. So what the GOP did was they stayed right about a budget, added a very small amount to it, but they stayed pretty much within a budget. Unemployment, they cut it from 268 billion to less than half, which is 110 billion. So their unemployment, however, only covered 2 weeks. So they only wanted to cover 2 weeks of unemployment, as opposed to what we see over here of what was covered. I believe it was 13 weeks. I believe it was 13 weeks was covered. So now we have more people unemployed, but we have less money, 110 billion. Less money, less time. Okay. So then you have your tax rebate, and I'm covering the things that is impacting the people the most right now, as far as us making sure that we're covered, make sure that we're eating. You have that tax rebate. That's your stimulus, that $1,200. They gave $293 initially. Now we've got it at $300 billion. So before it was $293 billion, now we're at $300 billion. That's our tax rebate. That tax rebate is to cover for 1 month. Okay. And then of course you still have your SBA, you have your employment tax break, your health related tax break, your EDU, your education funding for education, domestic, and then other. The difference that I did see here versus the CARES Act. In the CARES Act, we had other spent $15 billion of other money. It was not assigned or it does not have, it's just other, meaning whatever else we need. We've got $15 billion. I would like to see what I see in the HEALS Act, which is under their other, which is $39 billion of other expenses. They've allocated it, showing you exactly where those other expenses are going to go. So that's what we need. We do need more transparency. We want to see transparency because we want to make sure that the funding is assigned so that there can be accountability. If you just have a random amount of funding and you say 15 billion for other, well, that's 15 billion for who? So we did see that issue with the SBA as well. So the SBA, under the CARES Act, we had 377 billion for the SBA CARES Act. But the issue is what we fell under is a lot of people that really didn't qualify for the loan, applied for the loan. So we want to have more accountability because the money didn't go to the places that they needed to go to the businesses that they needed to go to the small businesses. You had multi-billion and trillion-dollar businesses taking out the loan when they didn't need it, which is when you saw that they had to return the loan. So we want to make sure that that's not even possible, that doesn't even happen. So we want to make sure that there is more accountability. The way you have accountability is through transparency, making sure that everything is transparent. The guidelines are clear. So simplicity is what's best. So that is under the HEALS Act. So HEALS Act, GOP is saying 1.1 trillion. And I want to just bring it to our attention of what I was suggesting is 1.7 trillion. So that means that what we're adding is about 600 billion to what they said. So the GOP, remember I told you the GOP, you guys need to come up. And I was saying come up 600 billion. Now let's get to the HEROES Act. And I'm going to show you this real quick and then we're going to finish it. The HEROES Act is my Dems. Over the next decade, we want to have $3.4 trillion. And so for state and local, we want to have 1.13 trillion. For support services, 485 billion. For the rebate, we have pretty much double what we originally had for the rebate. For the rebates, we've got 435 billion. So the thing that we want to see here is most of these acts are decade-long acts. So if we have decade-long acts, what we know for a fact is that we need a quick solution that covers majority of today or right now, not a long-term solution that's going to cover a lot of the future, because we're going to have to come back and re-talk about future anyways. So even if we pass a bill right now, the key is that if we pass a bill right now, before this year is out, we will be talking about another bill. Why? Because people will be going through the same thing. Why? Because we have a ramp-up season of COVID-19. And it's very likely that through that ramp-up season, through the flu season, that things will have to shut down again and unemployment will be higher. So what we're saying is what we want to see is a short-term bill, something that you don't have a lot of time to make a decision on. So if you don't have a lot of time to make a decision, and you're adding for the depth, the breadth, and the width of everything that we're going through, well, there's not a lot of time to really negotiate that. So we need something that's quick and that's simple. Okay, so what we do is we make sure everybody is covered. You take the 1.1 trillion and you going from 3.4 trillion, you want to bring it down. And so actually that's going to be exactly half of the 3.4 trillion. So 3.4 trillion and half of your 3.4 trillion gets you to 1.7 trillion, which is an increase for the GOP. What we're saying is increase about 600 billion. And then heroes, I need you to come down 50% to get us to that 1.7 so that we can get out and we can all be eating. Because we already know we're going to have to come back and we're going to have to do a second bill. And the reason I'm suggesting this bill also is because we have to remember in previous times when Obama was in office, he got us out of a recession with just over 800 billion. Now, granted, the times are absolutely different. And the situation, the crisis, and the needs are absolutely different. But I point that out because I want to show you how great 800 billion did for us in that time. And we were at a time where the economy was about to be on a downward spiral to crashing. And through an $800 stimulus, we revived our economy to the point where employment was up by the time Trump got in office. So what we're looking at is saying 1.1 trillion plus adding that 600. But let's talk about, and then let's talk about where that 600 comes from or where it's going to go, because we want to make sure unemployment is covered. But we don't just need it covered for 2 weeks. We're going to need it for 8 weeks, which means 2 months. Unemployment needs to be covered for 2 months. That means for the next 2 months, everybody who's applied for unemployment should be receiving $600 for the next 2 months. That gives you time enough to go on your vacation, get back, and negotiate a long-term bill, and while we are still covered for that next 8 weeks. So that would bring you, and what I'm suggesting there is take it up $140 billion will cover us for 8 weeks. So the 110 plus the 140 addition brings us to $250 billion for unemployment. $250 billion would cover us for 8 weeks of unemployment. For the tax rebate, you're giving it to us for 1 month, but the truth is we still need 2 months because there are a lot of students that are not qualifying for unemployment. So you have to make sure that the students are covered, and then there are some seniors that also still need help. So we have to make sure that everybody is covered. So we want to, for that, if it's 300 is for 1 month, what we're saying is 2 months. So now you take it to 600 billion for your tax rebate. Then you say, well, the remainder of the money is what? Goes to healthcare and education. So the remainder of the funds of that extra 600 that I said, we're going to add about 600. The remainder of that goes where? To healthcare and to education. Bringing that healthcare so that we can make sure the healthcare is covered, that they have everything that they need, all their supplies, bringing that up about 200 billion or about 100 billion. So adding an extra 100 billion to the healthcare, but adding an extra 60 billion to education. So right now, our economy is so much that there's so many things that we can't determine just yet because COVID-19. We don't know about the education system. We're still trying to debate if kids should go back to school, regardless of the fact that that the rate has increased for children 130% since last month, COVID cases for young adults, for children. 130%. So we're still trying to figure out, should they go back to school? So we want to make sure that regardless, they're covered at 60 billion. So if the parents do have them, if they do go back to school, they're covered. If they stay home, they're covered, and we can get the technology and the things that we need for them to stay home if they're staying home. But you have that allotted there. For the healthcare, we're going through a ramp up season, so they're going to need double the 111. Take them up another 100, gets us to 211. When you add that, what I just gave you together, that's going to take you to $1.7 trillion. You've just covered $1.7 trillion would have given you unemployment checks at $600 for 2 months. it would have given you a tax rebate of $1,200 for everybody that are under that qualify for 2 months. And then you would have doubled your health related expenses, and you would have added $60 billion to your education to make sure the children are covered. And we could have been out. We could have made that arrangement, and we could have made a deal, the GOP and the Dems. The truth is, it's easier for the Dems to come down than it is for the GOP to go up. Because when funding is already allotted, it's easier to stay within what's allotted than to supersede it. What I want us to be conscious of as we go forward and as we are actually negotiating 3.4 trillion versus 1.1 is the fact that we're going to need more funding down the line, because we don't have a vaccine or a solution just yet. So we don't know how much funding we're going to actually need coming soon. So why spend everything up front before you know what really is the situation? It's easier to say, let's spend a little bit less and still have everybody covered until we really can see what this is going to look like at the end of this month, at the end of this year. Because we don't know how high COVID-19 is really going to ramp up. And we don't know how much more funding we're going to need to spend. And for the average person, if it was their own house at the beginning of a disaster, you don't spend all of your money up front. You don't take all of your money and all of the budget that's allotted and spend it up front, regardless of the fact that you can go to the federal and get more. Because the truth is we really don't know what the end of this year is going to look like with COVID-19 and the flu season that's coming upon us, and the increase just last month of 130% cases for children, and they haven't all went back to school. So we have to be considerate of that, not of the seats that you're trying to get, not trying to make another party look bad, not trying to get new votes and new people to support your votes or make the other party look like it was their fault. We don't have time for that. What we have time for is a wise compromise. 1.7 billion covers everybody for the next 2 months, and some of the other parties will be even supported over the next decade, the remainder of the funding. So that covers us, that keeps us, and then when that time is up, we'll be able to come back and renegotiate another plan, because I guarantee you, this is not the end. This is not the end for us. So this is 1.1 trillion, 3.4 trillion. I wanted to show you that so that you can see for yourself what makes more sense, and the transparency of the dilemmas that we're experiencing, and the lack of compromise, which doesn't make sense. The only sense that a lack of compromise makes is that somebody has a personal agenda. So if you continue to not compromise, what you guys are showing as an economy or as a country or as a government is that there are too many personal agendas that are not that does not have the people's needs and perspective in mind. So you have to remember, you're here to serve the people. And right now we need an urgent solution, not a solution that pushes us out and we stalemate until the next president is in office. We need a solution right now. So this is not a time to broker for votes. This is a time to act, and we need you to act. Thank you.